Tears slid down Vivien's cheeks and splashed onto the divorce papers resting in front of her. The ink blurred slightly, but no one around the Thanksgiving table seemed to notice. They were too busy laughing. The laughter wasn't warm. It wasn't the sound of family. It sounded more like a verdict. Vivien gripped the pen tightly as her husband, Derek Ashford, nudged the documents toward her. His expression carried none of the kindness she had once fallen in love with. "Go ahead," he said coldly. "Sign it. Let's stop pretending this marriage was ever going to work." A ripple of approval moved around the room. Trevor, Derek's older brother, lifted his wine glass with a grin. To Derek's freedom. Crystal glasses collided. Smiles spread across faces. Catherine Ashford leaned forward, her voice dripping with artificial sympathy. "You really should have known this day would come, dear. Dreams are nice, but they don't make someone part of a family like ours." Gabriella laughed openly. "Honestly, I still can't believe she thought she belonged here." Even Derek's grandmother smiled into her tea. "At least she signed the prenuptial agreement. She'll leave exactly the way she arrived." Nothing. The room erupted in quiet amusement. Vivien lowered her eyes and carefully signed her name. No arguments. No tears. No begging. Just one elegant signature. Yet while they celebrated what they believed was her downfall, not a single person in that room knew the truth. 5 days earlier, Sterling Pharmaceuticals had been hours away from collapse. Banks were preparing to pull support. Investors were disappearing. 70 years of family legacy was hanging by a thread. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, a private investment fund injected $100 million into the company. The rescue package had arrived anonymously. The Ashfords had spent the entire week celebrating their miracle. What they didn't know was that the approval for that investment had come directly from Vivien. And now, the same woman they were throwing out had the power to erase that miracle with a single phone call. Vivien folded the divorce papers neatly. The same precise way she folded billion-dollar acquisition contracts. The same way she signed documents that moved markets. The same way she approved investments that determined whether companies lived or died. Then she quietly reached beneath the table and picked up her phone. One message. 3 words. "Come immediately." She pressed send. 40 minutes later, the doorbell rang. The timing couldn't have been worse. Dessert had just been served. Trevor was halfway through another joke at Vivien's expense when Catherine stood to answer the door. A moment later, silence flooded the house. Everyone turned. 3 individuals in dark business suits had stepped inside. They carried no gifts, no smiles, no explanations. Richard Ashford immediately rose from his chair, his face drained of color. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. The visitors ignored him completely. Instead, they scanned the room, searching, until they found Vivien, the woman everyone had spent the evening humiliating, the woman still holding her divorce papers, the woman they thought was worthless. To everyone's shock, the 3 visitors stopped in front of her. Then they bowed, deeply, respectfully. "Ma'am," the oldest man said, "we came as quickly as possible." A teacup slipped from Grandma Ashford's trembling hands and shattered across the floor. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Derek stared at Vivien as if he were looking at a stranger, because in that moment he realized he was. Slowly, Vivien rose from her chair. The tears were gone. So was the sadness. Something far more dangerous had replaced them. Power. The room suddenly felt smaller. The laughter had vanished. And for the first time all evening, fear entered the Ashford family's eyes. Because the question was no longer who Vivien really was. The terrifying question was what she would do next. Before we continue, take a moment to subscribe and let us know where you're watching from. What happened after that Thanksgiving dinner changed the Ashford family forever. Years earlier, before secrets, lies, and betrayals, Vivien's life had looked very different. The gallery smelled faintly of rain-soaked wood and fresh paint. Afternoon sunlight streamed through dusty windows, turning floating particles into tiny sparks of gold. Vivien stood before a canvas, her fingers stained with cerulean blue paint, her favorite color, a color that always reminded her of possibility. She was so focused on her work that she didn't hear someone enter. The bell above the door had been broken for weeks. She kept forgetting to replace it. Is this painting for sale? The voice startled her. Turning around, she found a man studying a watercolor hanging near the window. He wasn't looking at her. He wasn't looking around the gallery. He was completely absorbed by the artwork. That alone made him different. Most visitors noticed her before they noticed the paintings. This man seemed unaware she even existed. It's not mine, Vivien replied, setting down her brush. One of my students painted it. The stranger stepped closer. His suit was expensive, though he wore it casually. His tie hung slightly loose, as if he'd escaped a long day of meetings. She's talented, he said softly. The water almost looks alive. Vivien blinked. There was no fake charm, no rehearsed compliment, just genuine admiration for a young artist's work. Something inside her relaxed. For years, she had hidden behind carefully constructed walls. Too many people saw her wealth before they saw her humanity. Too many conversations began with curiosity about her fortune rather than her dreams. This man hadn't asked a single question about her. I'm Derek, he said, extending his hand. Vivien Harper. The alias slipped out naturally, comfortably, easier than explaining who she really was. Easier than admitting she was Vivien Hartwell, billionaire founder, investor, and one of the most influential women in global business. A woman whose face appeared on magazine covers and financial news channels. A woman who could never be certain whether people loved her or her money. They talked for hours. One conversation became another, then another. Outside, the sun slowly disappeared behind the skyline. Inside, neither noticed the time passing. Derek spoke about the pressure of working in his family's pharmaceutical company. The expectations, the responsibilities, the endless struggle of living up to a famous family name. Vivien spoke about teaching art to children, about creativity, about finding beauty in ordinary things. She never mentioned her companies, never mentioned private jets, never mentioned the skyscrapers and investments carrying her name. And for the first time in years, she felt something she hadn't expected. Normal. Months passed quickly. Coffee dates turned into dinners. Dinners became late-night conversations. Before long, Derek's voice felt like home. For once, Vivien allowed herself to believe she had found someone who cared about her rather than her bank account. Someone who loved the woman behind the fortune. She had no idea how wrong she would eventually be. The first cracks in the marriage didn't appear all at once. They crept in quietly, almost unnoticed. By the middle of their second year together, Derek had started coming home later and later. His laughter faded. His affection became rare. Conversations that once lasted hours were reduced to a few distracted words before bed. It wasn't another woman. That would have been easier to understand. Instead, it was something far more painful. Derek was slowly becoming the man his family wanted him to be. And every day, he chose their approval over his wife. The Sunday dinners grew unbearable. What had once felt merely uncomfortable transformed into a weekly trial. Gabriella's remarks became sharper. Trevor's jokes became crueler. Richard barely bothered hiding his contempt anymore. And Catherine perfected the art of smiling while delivering insults. One Sunday evening, Richard was discussing market trends at the dinner table when Vivien casually offered an observation. He didn't even let her finish. You wouldn't understand pharmaceutical markets, he said dismissively. It's a highly technical industry. The table chuckled. Vivien lowered her eyes. Inside, she nearly laughed. She owned controlling interests in pharmaceutical companies worth more than everything Richard had spent his life building. But she simply smiled. She had grown accustomed to wearing the mask. The harmless artist. The lucky wife. The woman they all believed was beneath them. What hurt wasn't the insults. It was Derek, because he never said a word. Not once. Not in 2 years. Every Sunday, he sat quietly while his family dismantled her dignity piece by piece. And every Sunday, she watched him choose silence. After dinner, while Derek slept peacefully beside her, Vivien would step into the second bedroom they called her studio. The moment the door closed, her real life began. Encrypted messages appeared on her laptop. Private conference calls connected across continents. Investors waited for her decisions. Executives waited for her approval. Entire industries shifted because of choices she made before sunrise. One evening, her chief financial officer, Diana Foster, appeared on a secure video call. Her expression was grim. Sterling Pharmaceuticals is collapsing faster than expected. Vivien looked up. The company had become a familiar name in her reports. Not because she cared about Richard Ashford, but because Hartwell Global monitored every major pharmaceutical player in the market. What happened now, she asked. Diana pulled up several charts. The numbers were ugly. Blood-red losses stretched across the screen. 3 major contracts gone. Creditors are nervous. Cash reserves are nearly exhausted. She paused. Richard Ashford is driving the company straight into a wall. Vivien studied the reports. The same man who treated her like she was ignorant was destroying the business his father and grandfather had spent decades building. The irony would have been funny if hundreds of employees weren't caught in the crossfire. Keep watching them, Vivien said quietly. Diana nodded. The call ended, but the reports kept coming, and every quarter looked worse than the one before. Then everything changed. 1 week before Thanksgiving, Vivien's phone rang. The caller ID showed Diana. She answered immediately. The urgency in Diana's voice told her something was wrong. Sterling Pharmaceuticals just got hit with loan recalls. Vivien sat upright. How bad? Their largest creditor is demanding immediate repayment. A few seconds later, a news alert appeared on her screen. Sterling Pharmaceuticals faces bankruptcy. Emergency investment sought. Vivien opened the article. The situation was catastrophic. Timeline, she asked. They have 6 days. Silence. Then Diana added quietly. After that, liquidation begins. Vivien leaned back. Her mind wasn't on Richard, or Catherine, or Gabriella. She was thinking about 400 employees, families, mortgages, college tuition, people who would lose everything because leadership had failed them. She closed her eyes. 2 years of humiliation flashed through her mind. 2 years of swallowing insults. 2 years of pretending to be powerless. Then she made a decision. Prepare an offer. Diana blinked. What kind of offer? $100 million. Diana almost choked. $100 million. Through Hartwell Investments. And the terms. Vivien stared out the window. A strange smile touched her lips. $1,000 a month. Diana frowned. That's practically free. I know. They'll think it's suspicious. No. Vivien's eyes hardened. They're too desperate. Diana hesitated. Why are you doing this? Vivien was silent for several moments. Finally, she answered. Because I want to learn something. What? Her voice turned cold. I want to see how people behave when they're saved by someone they think is beneath them. The offer was delivered that afternoon. Richard Ashford received the call personally. James Crawford handled the negotiations. Vivien listened through a secure conference line. $100 million, James said calmly. Richard nearly laughed. There must be a mistake. No mistake. And the return? $1,000 monthly. Silence. Then disbelief. Then excitement. Then greed. Richard's breathing changed. The pause lasted only seconds. We accept. The money was transferred before sunset. Just like that, the company was saved. That evening, Derek walked through their apartment door, looking lighter than he had in months. For the first time in ages, he was smiling. Actually smiling. We're saved, he announced. Vivien looked up from her sketchbook. Saved? An investor appeared out of nowhere. His eyes sparkled with excitement. $100 million. He laughed. Dad still thinks it's a dream. Vivien smiled softly. I imagine he does. Derek sat beside her. His entire body seemed relaxed. The stress he'd been carrying had vanished. Mom wants a huge Thanksgiving celebration. Of course she does. Dad's calling it the gratitude dinner. The irony almost made Vivien laugh. Instead, she nodded. That sounds nice. Then something unexpected happened. Derek wrapped his arms around her. The first genuine embrace she'd received from him in weeks. Maybe months. Things are going to be different now, he whispered. Vivien rested her head against his shoulder. The weight of the truth sat between them like a secret neither could see. I'm sure they will, she said quietly. Over the next few days, the Ashford family transformed. The panic was gone. The fear was gone. Hope had returned. Catherine suddenly sounded cheerful during her endless phone calls. Gabriella became obsessed with planning the celebration. Richard walked around like a man who had cheated death. At Sunday dinner, the mood was almost festive. Richard checked the company accounts every few minutes, still unable to believe the money was real. For the first time ever, Catherine complimented Vivien's dress. The miracle investor had made everyone kinder, at least temporarily. Trevor lifted his wine glass. To whoever gave us that money. Everyone smiled. Then he laughed. Although honestly, anyone who hands over $100 million for practically nothing must be an idiot. The table erupted. Gabriella nearly spilled her drink. Seriously, she agreed. Who does that? Vivien took a slow sip of wine. Maybe they were just generous. The room went quiet. Several heads turned toward her. Then Richard snorted. Generosity in business is stupidity wearing a disguise. The laughter returned. Vivien smiled politely, but inside, she memorized every word. Thanksgiving morning arrived cold and bright. Standing in front of her bedroom mirror, Vivien carefully chose a simple dress. Nothing designer, nothing flashy, nothing that would raise questions. Exactly what they expected. Exactly who they believed she was. As she adjusted an earring, Derek stepped behind her. You ready? She met his reflection. Ready. The drive to the mansion was peaceful. For once, Derek seemed genuinely happy. Halfway there, he reached over and squeezed her hand. Thank you. Vivien looked at him. For what? For staying. His voice softened. I know my family isn't easy. An understatement. But you never gave up on me. Vivien stared at their joined hands. At the wedding ring still resting on her finger. At the man who had watched her be humiliated for 2 years and never once stood beside her. Yes, she said quietly. I stayed. The mansion looked like something out of a luxury magazine. Fall decorations covered every room. Candles flickered. Crystal sparkled. The smell of roasted turkey drifted through the halls. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. And deep down, a strange unease began to grow. She couldn't explain it, but something felt wrong. Very wrong. When they entered the living room, she noticed Derek exchanging glances with his mother. Richard kept checking his watch. Trevor looked unusually excited. Everyone seemed to be waiting for something. Still, she ignored the feeling. She wanted peace. Just one holiday without conflict. Just one meal without insults. But storms rarely announce themselves before they arrive. Sometimes they smile first. Dinner began. The conversation flowed easily. Laughter filled the room. For a brief moment, Vivien almost believed things had changed. Then Derek stood. The room instantly quieted. He tapped his glass. I'd like to say something. Everyone smiled. Everyone knew what was coming. Except Vivien. We've been given a second chance, Derek began. Our company survived. Nods circled the table. Grateful smiles appeared. But today isn't just about celebrating survival. A strange chill ran through Vivien's chest. Derek reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a stack of folded documents. The second she saw them, her stomach dropped. She recognized legal paperwork immediately. Years of corporate negotiations had made that impossible to miss. Derek unfolded the papers, placed them carefully on the table, then slid them toward her. The heading stared back at her. Petition for dissolution of marriage. The room suddenly felt silent. Too silent. Vivien looked up slowly. Derek, his face was emotionless. We both know this marriage isn't working. Every word felt rehearsed. Prepared. Planned. Her eyes moved around the table. No one looked surprised. Not Catherine. Not Richard. Not Gabriella. Not Trevor. They had all known. This wasn't an announcement. It was an ambush. A public execution disguised as Thanksgiving dinner. And everyone present had bought a front row seat. Sign them, Derek said. His voice was calm. Cold. Final. The smile spreading across Catherine's face made Vivien's blood run cold. The celebration she thought was for the company's survival had never been about gratitude. It had been about her destruction. And suddenly, everything made sense. Don't cry. Not here. Not in front of them. Vivien repeated the words inside her head like a prayer. But her body refused to listen. Hot tears spilled down her cheeks anyway. The room immediately noticed. And they enjoyed it. Derek barely looked at her. Just sign the papers, he he said, sounding more annoyed than emotional. The prenup protects both of us. You leave with what you brought into the marriage. We keep what belongs to us. Simple. Simple. As if 2 years of sacrifice could be reduced to a legal form. Trevor leaned forward, grinning. You'll survive. Maybe you'll sell paintings on a street corner somewhere. A few people laughed. Catherine sighed dramatically. I'm sure another family will fall for the struggling artist routine eventually. More laughter. Vivien lowered her eyes. 2 years. 2 years of insults disguised as advice. 2 years of pretending she didn't hear the whispers. 2 years of waiting for her husband to defend her. 2 years of hoping. And now she finally understood. Nothing she could have done would ever have been enough. Not because she lacked value. Because they had already decided she had none. Derek pushed the documents closer. Sign them and stop dragging this out. The pen rested beside her plate. Vivien picked it up. Around the table, glasses rose higher. People smiled. Some were openly excited. They weren't witnessing the end of a marriage. They were celebrating a victory. Her tears landed on the paper. Ink blurred. For a moment, she couldn't even read the words anymore. Then Catherine lifted her phone. A camera shutter clicked. Vivien looked up. What are you doing? Creating a memory, Catherine replied with a smile. This feels like a special occasion. The cruelty of it stunned even Vivien. But she said nothing. Slowly, she signed. Every letter felt heavier than the last. Vivien. The false identity she had carried for 3 years. The name she had used while searching for something money could never buy. Real love. When she finished, Gabriella actually applauded. Finally, Trevor lifted his glass. To freedom from losers. Crystal clinked. Laughter echoed. Richard looked pleased. Catherine looked victorious. Even Eleanor nodded approvingly. And Derek looked relieved. That hurt the most. Vivien folded the divorce papers carefully. Neatly. Methodically. The tears stopped. Not because the pain was gone. Because something else had replaced it. Something colder. Something harder. Something that no longer cared what they thought. Without drawing attention, she reached beneath the table and picked up her phone. 3 contacts. 1 message. Come now. She pressed send, then placed the phone face down beside her plate. The countdown had begun. Richard rose to his feet, wine glass in hand. Now we can celebrate properly. The room cheered. Our company has been saved. Our family has been restored. This Thanksgiving truly is a blessing. Especially thanks to that mysterious investor, Catherine added. Trevor laughed. Whoever handed over $100 million for almost nothing must be the dumbest investor alive. The table erupted. Gabriella shook her head. Imagine having that much money and that little common sense. Vivien remained silent. Watching, listening, memorizing. They had no idea. Not only had she saved them, they were insulting her while sitting in a house that would have been worthless within a week without her help. Trevor kept going. You know the funniest part? What? Gabriella asked. The $1,000 monthly payment. More laughter. Richard nodded. Our entire board jokes about it. We call it charity disguised as investing. Every month we send that payment and laugh. Vivien finally spoke. Have you made the payments? The laughter faded. Richard looked at her. Of course. His tone was dismissive. We honor contracts. Catherine smirked. Even ridiculous ones. Vivien glanced at her watch. 5 minutes. 35 to go. No one. Catherine asked. The question sounded more like an order to leave. No thank you. Vivien folded her hands. I'll wait. Derek frowned. Wait for what? Vivien met his eyes. For what happens next? The room grew quiet. Eleanor studied her carefully. For the first time all evening, the old woman looked unsettled. Gabriella rolled her eyes. The papers are signed. You can leave now. I'd rather stay. Catherine's smile tightened. Suit yourself. Dinner continued. But the mood had changed. Something felt wrong. Nobody could explain why. Vivien wasn't crying anymore. She wasn't arguing. She wasn't begging. She wasn't angry. She was simply waiting. And somehow that frightened them more. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. Conversations became shorter. Laughter sounded forced. People kept glancing toward Vivien. Derek finally leaned toward her. You should really go. Not yet. What? Vivien, check her watch. 10 more minutes. His face tightened. What happens in 10 minutes? You'll see. The answer chilled him. 38 minutes. 39. 40. The doorbell rang. Every head turned. Silence crashed over the room. Richard froze. Trevor lowered his drink. Gabriella looked toward the hallway. Derek slowly turned toward Vivien. The doorbell rang again. Longer this time. More deliberate. Catherine stood. We aren't expecting anyone. I am, Vivien said calmly. The words hit the room like thunder. Catherine walked toward the entrance. Her heels clicked across marble flooring. Everyone listened. The front door opened. Muted voices. Professional voices. Then Catherine spoke. I'm sorry, but we're in the middle of a private family, she stopped. Complete silence. A female voice answered. We're here for Ms. Vivien Hartwell. The dining room froze. A few seconds later, Catherine stumbled backward into view. Her face had gone completely white. 3 people entered. James Crawford, Diana Foster, Jonathan Pierce, each dressed in tailored business attire, each carrying themselves with unmistakable authority. They didn't ask permission. They didn't introduce themselves. They simply walked forward, straight into the dining room. Richard shot to his feet. What is this? Nobody answered. The visitors weren't looking at him. They weren't looking at anyone else. Their attention was fixed entirely on Vivien. When they reached her chair, all 3 stopped. Then, in perfect unison, they bowed, deeply, respectfully. The entire room stopped breathing. Boss, James said. We came as quickly as possible. Diana looked genuinely concerned. Are you all right, Miss Hartwell? Jonathan nodded. We left a board meeting halfway through. Just tell us what you need. A sharp crash shattered the silence. Eleanor's teacup slipped from her fingers. Porcelain exploded across the floor. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Richard looked as though someone had drained all the blood from his body. Catherine gripped the doorway to keep herself standing. Trevor's mouth hung open. Gabriella looked physically sick. And Derek stared at his wife as if he had never seen her before. Boss, Gabriella whispered. The word barely escaped her lips. Trevor dropped his champagne glass. Red wine spread across the white tablecloth like a wound. James calmly opened his briefcase. We have the withdrawal authorization documents prepared. Richard blinked. What withdrawal? For the first time, Diana looked at him. Her expression contained no warmth, only professionalism. The $100 million investment. The room seemed to shrink. Diana continued. Ms. Hartwell has decided to exercise her withdrawal rights under the investment agreement signed 5 days ago. Richard grabbed the edge of the table. No. His voice cracked. No, that's impossible. Catherine stared at Vivien. Ms. Hartwell. The name sounded foreign on her tongue. Jonathan folded his arms. Vivien Harper Hartwell. He paused. Founder and CEO of Hartwell Global Industries. The silence deepened. Estimated net worth, $3.7 billion. The words detonated inside the room. Richard looked stunned. Gabriella looked nauseous. Trevor looked terrified. And Derek looked broken. You investigated me, Vivien said quietly. Richard nodded mechanically. We found an art gallery. James smiled faintly. Which she owned. A small apartment, Catherine whispered. Which she also owned, Diana replied. The building, too. Gabriella's face drained of color. The investor. Her voice shook. V. Hartwell. Understanding finally hit. Oh my God. Jonathan nodded. Correct. The anonymous investor. The billionaire. The person who saved Sterling Pharmaceuticals. The person who saved 400 jobs. The person who prevented bankruptcy. Have been sitting at their dinner table all along. And 30 minutes earlier, they had divorced her. Diana looked directly at Richard. The woman you spent 2 years insulting. The woman you just publicly humiliated. The woman you called worthless. Is the same person who wired $100 million into your company. Nobody spoke. Nobody could. The truth was too large. Too devastating. Too final. Derek looked at Vivien. His eyes filled with panic. No. His voice cracked. No. This can't be real. Vivien rose slowly from her chair. The divorce papers still rested in her hand. But the woman standing before them was no longer the quiet artist they thought they knew. She carried herself differently now, like someone accustomed to boardrooms, negotiations, power, like someone who controlled destinies with a signature. I requested $1,000 a month, she said calmly. Not because I needed it. Her eyes moved around the table, one face at a time. I wanted to learn something. Nobody dared interrupt. I wanted to see how you treated people you believed were beneath you. Diana tapped her tablet. We recorded multiple board meetings. Her gaze settled on Richard. The investor was described as pathetic. Trevor, desperate. Gabriella, stupid. Each word landed harder than the last. Vivien nodded. The investor you mocked. The investor you laughed about. The investor you treated with contempt. She held up the divorce papers. Was the same woman you've treated that way for 2 years. Richard collapsed back into his chair. Catherine pressed a trembling hand against her throat. Derek looked physically ill. Vivien turned toward him. The prenup protected everything we brought into the marriage. A cold smile touched her lips. You believed it protected your family's fortune. The smile sharpened. In reality, it protected mine. Derek's face crumbled. Vivien, if I had known exactly. Her voice cut through the room, sharp as glass. If you had known. The words hit harder than any scream. Money should not determine whether someone deserves respect. She took a step forward. Kindness should not require a balance sheet. The silence that followed felt endless. Then she turned toward James. Proceed. James nodded. Immediately. Richard lurched forward. No. Panic flooded his voice. You can't do this. James calmly opened the contract. We can. Richard looked desperate now. What conditions were violated? For the first time all evening, Vivien smiled, and the expression terrified them. Simple, she said. The contract allowed withdrawal if the investor determined company leadership demonstrated conduct that posed a reputational risk. She paused, then looked around the room. Tonight, you provided overwhelming evidence. Good faith. Vivien's voice was calm, almost gentle, which somehow made the words hit harder. Respect for the investor. Professional conduct. Basic decency. Your company violated every one of those conditions. Richard looked like a man watching a building collapse around him. Catherine stepped forward, desperation replacing arrogance. But we didn't know it was you. For the first time that night, Vivien laughed. Not because anything was funny, because the excuse was so absurd. You didn't need to know it was me. The room fell silent. You only needed to treat another human being with respect. Her eyes swept across the table. You failed. Gabriella shot to her feet. You can't do this to us. The panic in her voice was unmistakable. We're family. Vivien slowly lifted the divorce papers. The signature at the bottom seemed to glow under the chandelier light. No, her voice was ice. You made sure of that 40 minutes ago. The truth finally landed. Not intellectually. Emotionally. They could see it now. The trembling in Richard's hands. The tears gathering in Catherine's eyes. Trevor's fear. Gabriella's horror. Eleanor's quiet acceptance. And Derek. Derek looked as if someone had ripped his future away and forced him to watch. Because for the first time, he understood exactly what he had destroyed. By Monday morning, Vivien said, turning toward James, I want every dollar withdrawn. James nodded. Understood. Terminate every agreement. Yes, ma'am. End all cooperation with Sterling Pharmaceuticals. The words landed like execution orders. Vivien, please. Derek finally moved. He reached toward her. Instinctively. Desperately. She stepped back before his fingers could touch her. The motion was graceful. Final. Like a door closing forever. For 2 years, she had wanted his hand. Wanted his support. Wanted him to choose her. Now, she couldn't bear the thought of him touching her. You wanted this divorce. Her eyes locked onto his. You wanted it at Thanksgiving. You wanted an audience. You wanted humiliation. The room shrank around them. Derek opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Vivien folded the papers. Congratulations. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. You got exactly what you wanted. Then she turned away. James, Diana, Jonathan, all three fell in a step behind her. At the doorway, she paused. One final glance. The Ashford family sat frozen among half-eaten food and shattered illusions. The celebration was over. Only consequences remained. I hope that $1,000 a month was worth it. No one answered. No one could. It cost you everything. Then she walked out. The November night swallowed her. And for the first time in years, she didn't look back. Behind her, someone started crying. She never learned who. The mansion doors closed with a soft click. Yet somehow the sound felt louder than thunder. Inside, an empire was dying. Outside, Vivien breathed deeply. The cold air stung her lungs. Freedom often did. James opened the sedan door. The car is ready. Vivien nodded. As they drove away, she watched the mansion disappear into darkness. A place she had spent 2 years trying to belong. A place that had never wanted her. A place she would never return to. For several minutes, nobody spoke. Finally, Diana broke the silence. "Are you okay?" Vivien stared out the window. The city lights blurred into streaks of gold. "I honestly don't know." It was the only truthful answer she had. The withdrawal documents were finalized before midnight. By dawn, the process had already begun. "The company won't survive," Jonathan said quietly. "They've leveraged everything." James nodded. "Without the investment, bankruptcy is unavoidable." Vivien closed her eyes. "Protect the employees." The three executives exchanged glances. Diana smiled softly. "We already started." "No." Vivien opened her eyes. "A full year of salary." Diana blinked. "A year. A year." The answer was immediate. "They worked for bad leaders." Her voice hardened. "They shouldn't have to pay for that." Diana immediately began typing. "It'll be done." Hours later, the sedan pulled into the underground entrance of Vivien's real residence. Not the apartment Derek knew. Not the modest life she'd shown the world. This was home. A penthouse suspended above the city skyline. 47 floors above the streets. Glass walls. Private elevators. Views stretching to the horizon. The life she had hidden for years. The elevator doors closed. For the first time all night, she was alone. Her phone buzzed. Then buzzed again. And again. 37 missed calls. Everyone from Derek. Messages poured in. "Please call me. I didn't know. We can fix this. My family was wrong. I love you. Please." Vivien stared at the screen for several seconds. Then powered off the phone. Some doors only need to close once. 1 week later, the headlines arrived. Sterling Pharmaceuticals files for bankruptcy. The story dominated financial news. Analysts debated what had happened. Experts speculated. Reporters searched desperately for answers. Nobody knew the full story. Not yet. By Wednesday, the company entered liquidation. 70 years of family legacy disappeared in less than 72 hours. Vivien watched the coverage from her executive office. Her real office. The one with her name on the door. No more hiding. No more pretending. No more shrinking herself to fit into someone else's world. The mansion has been listed for sale. Diana stood beside her desk, holding a report. "They're asking below market value." Vivien nodded. "The employees?" "Protected." Diana smiled. "The severance fund is active. Everyone received notice this morning. And interviews? Already scheduled." Vivien looked out the window. Good. The innocent had been protected. That mattered more than revenge. 3 weeks later, a courier arrived. The envelope was heavy, cream-colored, elegant, old-fashioned. The return address stopped her cold. Eleanor Ashford. For several minutes, she considered throwing it away. Instead, she opened it and read. The letter contained no excuses, no demands, no requests for forgiveness. Only truth. An old woman admitting that her family had become exactly what they claimed to despise. Small, cruel, proud, blind. When Vivien reached the final page, her eyes lingered on one sentence. "You were everything we claimed to value, and we rejected you because we were too arrogant to recognize it." She sat quietly for a long time, then folded the letter. A tear slid down her cheek. Not from pain, not for victory, from closure. Outside her office windows, the city glittered beneath a winter sky. Somewhere out there, Derek was rebuilding a life from the ruins. Somewhere out there, The Ashford family was learning what wealth couldn't buy. And Vivien was learning something too. The greatest revenge isn't destruction. It's walking away. It's healing. It's becoming happy while the people who hurt you are forced to live with their choices. A month later, Diana entered her office carrying a tablet. You should probably see this. The headline filled the screen. Derek Ashford enters rehabilitation program after financial collapse. The article detailed gambling problems, hidden debts, years of denial, secrets even his family hadn't fully understood. Vivien read silently, then handed the tablet back. He's finally facing himself. Diana studied her. Do you feel sorry for him? Vivien thought about it. The answer surprised even her. A little. Diana raised an eyebrow. After everything, pain doesn't erase humanity. She looked toward the skyline. But compassion doesn't mean going back. Diana nodded slowly. Fair enough. 6 weeks after Thanksgiving, the divorce became official. The courthouse was gray, cold, the kind of building that seemed to absorb joy. Vivien arrived with James. Derek arrived alone. No family, no lawyers, no audience. Just a man carrying the consequences of his choices. When he saw her, he froze. For a moment, neither moved. Neither spoke. The silence between them contained an entire marriage. The good moments, the lies, the hopes, the betrayal, the ending. Finally, Derek stepped forward, carefully, as though approaching something fragile or sacred. You look happy. Vivien studied him. The transformation was startling. He looked older, thinner, tired, not physically exhausted, spiritually exhausted, like someone who had spent weeks reliving a single mistake. I'm getting there, she said. Derek nodded. His eyes glistened. There isn't a day I don't think about what I did. Vivien said nothing, because some apologies deserve to be heard, even when they're too late. I thought I loved you. His voice cracked. But real love would have protected you. The honesty stunned her. For the first time in years, he wasn't making excuses. He wasn't blaming his family. He wasn't blaming circumstances. Only himself. I failed you. The words hung between them. Heavy. Painful. True. A courthouse clerk called their names. The final paperwork waited inside. Derek looked at her one last time. And for the first time since she had met him in that tiny art gallery years ago, he finally saw her clearly. Not her money. Not her status. Not her power. Her. The woman who had loved him when nobody was watching. The woman he had thrown away. And the woman he would never get back. The divorce hearing lasted less than 15 minutes. 2 years of marriage reduced to paperwork, signatures, and legal language spoken by people who felt nothing about either life being dismantled. The judge reviewed the prenuptial agreement with practiced efficiency. All assets acquired prior to marriage remain the property of the original owner. He glanced over his glasses. Mr. Ashford, you retain all assets brought into the marriage. Derek's attorney shifted uneasily. Your Honor, my client would like to contest. On what grounds? The judge's interruption was immediate. Silence. The lawyer opened his mouth, then closed it. There were no grounds. The agreement was airtight. Ironically, Derek had insisted on signing it because he believed he was protecting his family's wealth from Vivien. Now it was protecting hers from him. The judge turned another page. Ms. Hartwell, you retain all properties, investments, corporate holdings, and assets listed in your disclosure. Vivien smiled politely. Thank you, Your Honor. The judge nodded, then paused. His eyebrows lifted slightly as he reviewed additional financial records. Interesting. The room became still. It appears that several assets currently registered under Mr. Ashford's name were purchased using funds originating from Ms. Hartwell's personal accounts. Derek's face immediately lost color. They were gifts. James calmly stood. Not exactly. He slid several documents forward. My client paid off substantial personal debts incurred by Mr. Ashford throughout the marriage. The judge studied the records. His expression changed. These are gambling debts. James nodded. Among other liabilities. The courtroom grew quiet. Very quiet. The judge leaned back. Mr. Ashford, according to these records, the assets purchased with those funds legally belong to Ms. Hartwell. Derek stared at the table. The judge continued. It appears you are leaving this marriage with exactly what you entered it with. A pause, then one final glance at the documents, which according to these filings consist primarily of approximately $17,000 in student debt and a 23-year-old vehicle. The words landed harder than any insult. The gavel struck. Marriage dissolved. Just like that. It was over. Outside the courthouse, winter wind swept across the steps. Reporters waited across the street, hoping for a statement. Neither of them gave one. As Vivien descended the stairs, Derek hurried after her. Vivien. She stopped. He reached for her arm. His fingers touched her sleeve. Nothing more. Yet the look she gave him made him immediately let go. Not angry. Not hateful. Just distant. Like someone looking at a chapter she had already finished reading. I loved you. His voice broke. The words sounded raw. Desperate. Honest. I know you don't believe me anymore, but I loved you. Vivien studied him quietly, then shook her head. No. The answer was gentle, which somehow hurt more. You loved who you thought I was. Derek flinched. That's not true. It is. Her voice remained calm. You loved the version of me that made you comfortable. The silence stretched. You loved the woman you believed needed you. His eyes filled with tears. You don't mean that. I do. Vivien stepped closer, not to comfort him, to make sure he heard every word. You loved feeling superior. The words hit like a hammer. The struggling artist. The simple wife. The woman your family could mock while you stayed silent. Derek looked away, because deep down, he knew she was right. The moment you realized I didn't need saving. Vivien paused. The moment you discovered I was more powerful than you imagined. Her eyes softened with sadness. Everything changed. Derek swallowed hard. You handed me divorce papers at Thanksgiving dinner. Her voice dropped lower. In front of your family. In front of people who spent years humiliating me. You want an audience. You wanted me embarrassed. You don't get to talk about fairness. The words left him defenseless. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Derek whispered something that surprised even himself. I ruined everything. Vivien didn't answer immediately. Finally, she nodded. Yes. The honesty nearly broke him. Not cruel. Not exaggerated. Simply true. He looked like a man watching his entire future disappear. I was wrong. His voice cracked. About all of it. Good. Vivien smiled sadly. That means there's still hope for you. His eyes lifted. Hope. A dangerous word. But Vivien wasn't offering reconciliation. Only a lesson. Maybe you'll treat the next person better. She adjusted her coat. Maybe you'll stand up for someone instead of standing beside people who hurt them. There won't be anyone else. The answer came too quickly. Too desperately. There was only you. Vivien's expression softened. Then hardened again. There was only me. Past tense. The words landed with finality. The woman you married doesn't exist anymore. Derek's face crumbled. Vivien, no. She raised a hand gently. Not angry. Just finished. For years, I made myself smaller. Her gaze drifted toward the city skyline. I hid my success. I hid my life. I hid parts of myself because I thought it would help people see the real me. A faint laugh escaped her. It turns out the real problem wasn't my money. Derek listened silently. It was choosing people who needed me to be less. The sentence hung between them. Heavy. Unavoidable. People who needed me small so they could feel important. Tears slid down Derek's face. For the first time, he truly understood. She had never lost herself. She had hidden herself, and he never cared enough to ask why. Vivien stepped backward, creating space, distance, an ending. I hope you get better. She meant it. I hope you face every demon you've been running from. Her eyes flickered toward him one final time. And I hope someday you become the man I thought I married. Then she turned and walked away. This time he didn't follow, because finally, he understood. Some losses can't be repaired, only remembered. 2 months later, sunlight poured through the enormous windows of Vivien's newest art center. Children filled the building. Teenagers painted murals. Music drifted through open classrooms. The entire facility had been built for one purpose. Opportunity. Not profit. Not publicity. Opportunity. A 14-year-old girl approached, nervously holding a watercolor painting. Ms. Hartwell. Just Vivien. The girl smiled shyly. Do you think this is any good? Vivien studied the painting. The city skyline reflected across a river. Light dancing across water. Tiny details most people would miss. And suddenly she was transported back years earlier. To a small gallery. To a stranger who had once admired a student's watercolor painting. Before everything went wrong. Before masks. Before lies. Before heartbreak. Vivien smiled. It's beautiful. The girl's face lit up. Really? Really? She pointed toward the water. You made it feel alive. The girl beamed. And something inside Vivien settled peacefully. Not revenge. Not victory. Not satisfaction. Peace. This was what mattered. Helping someone create something beautiful. Helping someone believe in themselves. Helping someone grow. Diana appeared beside her carrying a tablet. The board meeting starts in an hour. Vivien nodded. And 17 reporters want interviews regarding Sterling Pharmaceuticals. A faint smile touched her lips. Decline all of them. Diana laughed. What should I tell them? Vivien looked around the studio. At the students. At the paintings. At the future. Tell them some stories don't need to be retold. That evening she returned to her penthouse. The city glowed beneath her windows. For the final time, she opened Eleanor Ashford's letter. Read every word. Then carefully placed it into a storage box. Beside wedding photographs. The prenup. The divorce papers. Every memory from that chapter of her life. She closed the lid. Not erased. Not forgotten. Simply finished. Her phone buzzed. A message from James. All 400 employees have been placed in new positions. The last one started today. Vivien smiled. That mattered. Another message arrived. Richard Ashford has officially filed for personal bankruptcy. She stared at the screen, then set the phone down. No triumph. No celebration. Just acceptance. Consequences had arrived. Nothing more. Nothing less. Later that night, another message appeared. Unknown number. I saw the article about your new studio. It's beautiful. You're beautiful. I'm sorry I never saw it. Vivien read it once, then deleted it. Without hesitation. Some conversations end long before the final message arrives. She poured herself a glass of wine, walked toward the window, and looked out across the city. Somewhere out there, Derek was learning how to live without excuses. His family was learning that status cannot replace character. And Vivien was learning the most important lesson of all. The problem had never been her success. The problem had been shrinking herself to make others comfortable. Never again. Tomorrow she would wake up as herself. Fully. Openly. Without apology. She would lead her companies. Teach her students. Build her future. And if love ever found her again, it would meet the real Vivien from the beginning. No disguises. No tests. No pretending. Just truth. She raised her glass toward her reflection. The woman staring back looked stronger than the one who had entered that Thanksgiving dinner. Stronger than the one who had signed those divorce papers through tears. Stronger because she had survived. Because she had chosen dignity over revenge. Growth over bitterness. Freedom over fear. To new beginnings, she whispered. Her reflection smiled back. And this time, there was nothing hidden behind it. Nothing at all. Just Vivien. Finally free. And perhaps that was the greatest victory of all. If there's one lesson in this story, it's this. Never judge someone's worth by their appearance, their job, their bank account, or the role they seem to play in your life. The person you overlook today may be the very person holding your future tomorrow. More importantly, kindness should never depend on what someone can do for you. Because character is revealed not by how we treat powerful people, but by how we treat those we believe have no power at all. Let us know in the comments. What lesson did you learn from Vivien's story? And what would you have done differently in her place? And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories about justice, resilience, and the unexpected consequences of human choices.